This is Nick with logosbynick.com, and in today's tutorial I'll be demonstrating how you can design this vintage style logo using Adobe Illustrator. And if you'd like to follow along with this tutorial, I'd suggest that you download this font that I used here for the word vintage before opening Illustrator. It's called Bungasai. I'll have a link to it in the description section of the video. So go ahead and download and install that font. It's a free font, and once you've done that, we'll be good to get started. So let's open up Illustrator here and get to work. I'm going to open up a new file and click on New, and I'm going to use 1920 by 1080 in pixels. I'm going to open up a new artboard at that size and go ahead and click Create. And there we have our artboard open. So what we want to do now is make sure we have our document set up so that we're all working on the same page. So what I'll do is I'll go to Window, and I'll have Pathfinder selected. We want that window open. Actually, let me open that back up. Go ahead and click on Pathfinder to open up that little flyout menu. And then we'll go to View. We want to turn off Snap to Pixel, and then go back to View. Make sure you have Smart Guides turned off as well. And Snap to Point, we want that turned on. So we'll go ahead and close out of that. The first thing we're going to do is create this multi-pronged star shape that you see going along the back here of the logo. So to do that, I'll go over here to this rectangle tool, and I'll click and hold on that till we get this little flyout menu, and I'll go down to the star tool. And now I'm going to click and drag on the canvas to create a star. But if you notice, it only has 5 points. So what I'm going to do is while I'm holding this click, I'm going to press up on the arrow key, and it's going to add another prong in there. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a few more in there. And I'll hold Shift to lock this to the certain axis. Lock it onto the vertical axis like that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold Control as well. And once you hold Control, it's going to let you change the length of those prongs. If I let go of Control, I'm now changing the size. But if I hold Control, I'm now changing the size of the prongs. So I'm going to make these prongs about that size. About that size looks pretty good. And then I'll let go of everything, and there we have that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to color this in with a very faint shade of green. A very dull, washed out light shade of green. So to do that, I'll double click on our foreground, our fill color here, and I'll move the color picker up to like a greenish sort of yellow, and I'll select the color maybe about over here in this range. That's pretty good. If you'd like to use the same exact shade I'm using, it's B1C191. Go ahead and click OK. And we want to get rid of that black outline, otherwise known as the stroke. So we can come over here to this secondary color here, and we can just click the red slash to get rid of that and close out of that. And I'll grab the Select tool over here, and I want to put this towards the center of the page, and I want to hold Shift and Alt on the keyboard and grab this little arrow down here, and I'll just make this a little bit bigger. And now I want to center this up on the page, so I'll come over here to the Align tab, and from the Align To drop down, I'll choose Align to Artboard, and I'll just align it on the horizontal axis and the vertical axis, so it's centered up on the page like that. And what I'm going to do now is create a circle, a darker green circle, almost like a greenish blue, to go inside of there. So to do that, I'll come back over here to this star tool, click and hold on that, so we get our flyout menu, and I'm going to choose Ellipse. And then I'll hold Shift and Alt on the keyboard and click and drag to create a perfectly round circle like that. And again, I want to change the color of this, so I'll just double click on this color here. And I want to make this like a greenish blue, like that. Maybe up there between like green and blue. And I'll come and pick this down here. We want this to be fairly dark. Maybe something like that. Maybe I'll make this a little closer to blue. That's pretty good. And again, if you want to use the same shade I'm using, it's 3B6059. Go ahead and click OK. Then we'll go back to the Select tool, and I'll place this on the inside here, and I'll just align it up perfectly by aligning it on the horizontal and vertical axis. And then I'll hold Shift and Alt, and I'm just going to scale this so that it fits nicely inside of there. We don't want it being too small like that, where we have a whole bunch of padding in the light green area. And we don't want it being too big where you could hardly see the star shape in the background. So somewhere, like a good happy medium would be somewhere right about there. That's pretty good, I'd say. And what I want to do now is create the dotted line going around the inside of that circle. So to do that, I'll create another ellipse. So let's click on the Ellipse tool. Again, hold Control and Shift on the keyboard and click and drag to create a perfectly round ellipse like that. And I want to come up here to this first drop down and click the red slash to turn off the fill color. And I'll give this a stroke color of, just for now I'll use red. so we can see it. And the stroke size, I'm going to bring this up to maybe 4. And then I'll click on the word stroke right here to bring up this little flyout menu. And I want to turn on this this button right here that says dashed line. We want that to be a dashed line. For the dash width, the gap, I'll use maybe, let's try like 7, see how that looks. 7. Alright, that looks pretty good. What we can do now is come up here to where it says cap. We're going to change this to a projecting cap like that, so that the dashes are a little bit longer. And maybe I'll make the spacing between them a little more, so I'll change that to maybe 9 and see how that looks. Okay, I'd say that's pretty good. And once we've done that, we can just click on the word stroke again to close out of that menu. And we can go back to our select tool and put this towards the center of the page here. In fact, you could just align it on the horizontal and vertical axis. And then hold Control and Shift on the keyboard and click and drag the corner arrow to scale it up. Maybe not that much. Maybe something like that is pretty good. And what I'll do now is I'll go to Object, Path, and Outline Stroke. And that's going to turn that stroke into an actual path. And now we can go and change the color up here to something like white. I'll just make that white for now. I'll close out of that. And what I'll do next is create another circle going on the inside of here, which should be pretty simple. Instead of going and creating another circle, we can just create a duplicate of this dark green circle. So we can go ahead and click on that dark green circle. And to create a duplicate, we can hold Alt on the keyboard and click and drag out like that, and it'll create a duplicate copy. And we have that now. And I'll just scale that down a little bit by holding Shift and Alt and scaling that down. And I'll make that the same shade of light green that the star shape is. So I'll just click on the dropper tool over here and then click on that light green area, and that should make that the same shade. And now we can go back to the select tool and center it on the horizontal and vertical axis like that. And I'll just hold Control, actually hold Shift and Alt and just scale that down a little more like that. And that's pretty good. So the next step is we're going to create the ribbon going across this shape here. So before we do that, I want to click and drag over all of this, and I want to group this all together by going to Object, Group, or you can just hit Control G on the keyboard. And then I'll click off of that to deselect everything. And now we're going to create our text. So let's come over to the text tool and go ahead and click on the canvas to get some text. And up here from the font, the character, I'll click this drop down and I'm going to look for the Bungusai font or whatever font you'd like to use. There it is, Bungusai. And then I'm just going to change the wording. For the sake of this tutorial, I just used the word vintage. You could write whatever you want there though, so I'm just going to write vintage. And I want to make that a little bigger, so I'll grab the select tool and I'll hold Shift and Alt and grab the corner arrow and scale that up like that. And I want to change this from a text object to an actual path, so I'll go to Type and I'll go to Create Outlines. And what I'll do now is I'll put a rectangle going over this text. So to do that, I'll grab the I'll click and hold on the ellipse tool till we get our flyout menu, and I'll choose Rectangle tool. And then I'll just click and drag and create a rectangle going over this text. Maybe something like that. And what I want to do now is I'll make this a different shade. I'll make that red. Close out of that. And then I'll right click on that rectangle and go to Arrange and select Send Backwards so we can lower that beneath the text. Alright. And what I'll do now is I'll go to the opacity and I'll bring the opacity of that down a little bit. And actually, you know what? I'll leave that at 100%. We don't need to do that. And what I'll do now is I'll click and drag over both of those objects. Oops. Undo that. Control Z to undo. You could always go to Edit, Undo. We want to grab the Select tool first before doing that. We'll go to the Select tool, and then I'll click and drag over both of those objects. And I'm going to align them on the page horizontally and vertically like that. And if you notice now, it's a little too big for the rest of the logo, so I'm going to hold Shift and Alt and click and drag to scale that down. Maybe about that much. That's pretty good. Now we can click off of that to deselect everything. And what I want to do now is click on this red object and make this a similar shade that this dark green is, but a little lighter. So we'll use that as a good starting point. We'll grab the dropper tool and make that the same shade that that dark green is. But then we'll double click the color here, and I'm just going to make that a little lighter. Maybe something like that. Click OK. That's pretty good. I'm going to go to the Select tool. I'm going to click on the word Vintage here, and I'm going to change that to white. Right there, like that. And now I want to create the little tail the little fly out tails going on the sides here on the edges. So let me go back here. I'm going to click on this green rectangle. I want to create create another copy of this. So again, I'm going to hold Alt and click and drag it to create another copy of it like that. And I want to make this the same shade of dark green that this is here. So we'll grab the dropper tool and click on that. And go back to the select tool, and I want to right click that object and go to Arrange and go to Send Backward to lower that beneath that light green shade right there. And I want to take this and bring this about out here, I'd say. If you notice, what we're paying attention to here is this bottom area right here. Let me zoom in on this to show you. You could hold Alt and roll up the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. We want to have about this much padding between the difference in these shapes right here. Right about there. That's pretty good. And what I want to do now is I'll go to the Direct Select tool, and I'll click and drag over these left two nodes, and I'll bring them in. And as I'm bringing them in, I'm just going to hold Shift to lock it to the horizontal axis and bring them in about that far like that. And now in order to put a little indent in the tail there, I'm going to have to add a new anchor point in there to do that. So what I'll do is I'll come over to the pen tool and click and hold on that to get this flyout menu and go down to where it says Add Anchor Point tool. And we want to add this anchor point precisely halfway through the vertical width of this line right here. And to do that, I'm going to temporarily turn on Smart Guides. So I'll go to View, and where it says Smart Guides, I'll turn that on temporarily. And as you notice now, as I move the cursor, it'll show me where I'm at, that little pink line. And once it gets to where it says intersect, you'll know you're halfway there. So go ahead and click to add a new point there, and now we can go back and turn that off. So we'll go to View and turn that off. And I like to work with that turned off, the Smart Guides, because it can be somewhat annoying when you're trying to work. It gets in the way of things. So I only like to use that conditionally. So what we'll do now is we'll go back to the Direct Select tool and click on just that node here in the middle, and just bring that in a little bit. And again, I'm holding Shift to lock it onto the horizontal axis, maybe about that far. That's pretty good. And let me zoom in on this bottom left area here, because what we're going to do now is a little more intricate. I'm just going to hold Alt and roll up the mouse wheel. And if you want to move the page around, you can hold the space bar and just click and drag. That'll move the page around for you. Now I'm going to add these little dark areas in here, these little makeshift shadow type of objects. To do that, I'll grab the pen tool, I'll click and hold on that, and select the top one here that says pen tool. And I want to snap the cursor onto this corner of this light green rectangle and click. Bring the line over to this corner here and click. And then bring this line straight up and hold Shift to lock it onto the vertical axis so it goes straight up, and click. And then back to the starting point and then click. And we have our object. And I want to make this a darker shade of green than what it currently is. So I'll just double click this window right here. And I'll just bring this down a little bit to make this a little darker, like that. Go ahead and click OK. We'll go back to the Select tool, and I'm going to right click that and go to Arrange, Send Backward. I'll have to do that again, right click, Arrange, Send Backward. And there we go, now it's sitting below there. And we want to create another object like this, but going right here. So to do that, I'll go back to the pen tool, and I'll snap the cursor onto this top left corner and click. Bring the line down to this corner and click, and then bring the line up to about here, I'd say. Right about there, that's pretty good. Click, and then back to the starting point, and then click. And we need to cut out this extra area now. So to do that, I'll snap the pen tool onto this right here, and click, and hold Shift and bring the line straight out through here, and click, and we can let go of the Shift tool and finish up the shape going around the outside of that. And go to the Select tool. And with that selected, we could hold Shift and click on this other dark green object and go to Pathfinder and click the button that says -front. And there we have that. Now we can click off of that to deselect everything. And let me zoom out a little bit. I'm just going to hold Alt and roll down the mouse wheel maybe once like that. What we want to do now is create a duplicate of this little area and flip it around and put it over here, because that's what I did for the thumbnail here. So to do that, I'm going to click on all three of those objects first. First, I'll click on this one with the Select tool, hold Shift, click on this one, and while still holding Shift, click on that one. And then I'm going to hold Alt and click and drag to create a duplicate copy of that. And then what I'll do is I'll go to the Rotate tool, and I'll just rotate this around. And once I start rotating it, I'll hold Shift so we could rotate it perfectly according to 45-degree angles. And once we've rotated around 180 degrees like that, we're pretty good. And now we can go to the select tool. And what I want to do is take this corner right here and snap it onto this corner right here. So in order to do that, I'm going to hold Control on the keyboard, and we're going to get nodes at all of these different little corners. And once we get those, I'm going to grab this object at this node right here while holding Control and just click and drag and snap it onto this corner over here. And then we can let go of everything and it'll snap. And now I want to group that all together by going to Object, Group. Let me move over here a little bit. Again, to move the page around, I'm just holding the space bar and clicking and dragging. You want to lower that beneath this green rectangle, so I'll right-click that, go to Arrange, Send Backward. We'll do it again. Right-click, Arrange, Send Backward. Maybe one more time. Right-click, Arrange, Send Backward. It would probably be useful to memorize the keyboard shortcuts for these. Otherwise, you'll be clicking over and over again. Where this one, it's Control and the left bracket. And there we go. Now it's underneath there. And what I want to do now is group all of this together. So I'll hold Shift. With these still selected, I'll hold Shift, click on the text, and then click on the light green rectangle. Still holding Shift, click on this dark object, this dark green object, and then this object. And we want to group it all together by going to Object, Group. And if we click off of that and deselect everything, we should be able to click and drag this whole thing out of the way. But we don't want to do that, so let me hit Control-Z to undo that. I'm just going to hold Alt and roll down on the mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit. And I'll hold Shift and Alt, and I'm just going to resize this to make this bigger or smaller depending on how yours came out. Mine, I'll have to make it a little bigger like that. We want this to be sticking out. If you notice here, the left edge of the star shape, the light green star, this ribbon sticks out a little bit. That's what we want. We don't want this to be too much in here like that. We don't want it to be a little too close like that. We want this to be sticking out. We want the word with the ribbon to be the prominent point of the logo. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to shear this a little bit so it's running diagonally. If you notice here in the thumbnail, it's running diagonally like that. So let me go back. And to do that, I'll find the scale tool, click and hold on that, and go down to Shear tool. And then I'll just click and drag this upward to shear this up a little bit. And then I'll hold Shift to lock it onto the vertical axis. And I'll shear it maybe that much. And that's pretty good. We can go back to the Select tool, click off of the graphic to deselect everything. And what I want to do now is apply this texture, like this worn-looking texture to the graphic. And to do that, I will be using a particular image called scratch.png. I will have that linked in the description of the video as well. So go ahead and download that image and save it to somewhere where you can easily access it. So let me zoom out a little bit. I'm going to click and drag over this entire graphic and group it all together by going to Object, Group. So that's all one object now. And what I want to do is find that scratch.png image. For me, I have it here in this folder, scratch.png. I'm just going to click and drag that into Illustrator. And there we have that. I'm just going to take this. I'm going to take this and apply this to the logo as a texture mask. And what that's going to do is the white areas of this image are going to be transparent. The logo is going to show through. But the black areas of this image is going to punch a hole through the logo. If you notice, that's how it came out here. Those black areas in that image punched a hole through a logo. So it became transparent and it gave it sort of like an aged look. So I'm going to move this off of the artboard, and I'm just going to, with this selected, I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and then I'll click on the logo, and then we want to open up our transparency menu. So we'll go to Window and click on Transparency to open up that menu. And once that's open, we'll click this little stack of rectangles here, this menu icon, and go to Make Opacity Mask. And that's going to make our logo disappear temporarily, but that's all right because we're going to get it back in just a minute. Now I want to click on this black box right here and have that window selected and go to Edit, Paste. And it's going to paste that texture into there. And what you could do now is you can click and drag this texture around and move it around until it's positioned how you like it. So I think that's pretty cool that you can edit this on a live basis. When we do this with Inkscape, it doesn't let you edit it live like this. You have to apply it and see how it looks, and if you don't like it, you have to remove it and try again. So that's pretty cool about Illustrator. It'll let you do that. So something like that, that's pretty good. You don't want the texture area to be blocking out too much of the text so that you can't read it. So I think somewhere like there is pretty good. And once you have it placed somewhere you like, just go ahead and click back on the logo window there. And now you can click off of the graphic to deselect everything. And we're finished. We've created our vintage style logo using Adobe Illustrator. So if you have any questions, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching.